Welcome to Business Talk Sister Talk. I'm Becca.
And I'm Ruthie.
And today's episode title is How to Be a Good Mentee, Part 2. If you missed the first part of this interview with Bob Jacquart, the CEO of Stormy Kromer, you really need to go back and listen to the first one because this has been such a great conversation and we're excited to pick it back up. So, Bob, thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, it's just great. You guys are awesome. It's so nice to see two sisters working together so well. I've got two sisters that work for me that are my daughters, and it's pretty precious. So
I
good
love
for you
that.
guys.
When we first talked with you, one of the things that I was like, just thought was great is you were just like, yeah, you know, both my girls work here now, but I can't call them girls anymore. They're very accomplished women.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was so great that you're like trying to make sure you respect their place in the company. And
That's the toughest word for me to find is what do you call a group of ladies working at the factory? One time I called them ladies and you know, one of the girls came up to me and says, I don't work on the street. I'm not a lady. And you know, it's like, oh brother, and you know, gals, girls, you call them girls and they're too young, and you women. And so it's yeah. And if you say guys guys works well for guys, but I just don't have a great word for a group of women. And when you want to just be casual and say hello to them and respect them at the same time, of course.
Yeah. Well, we're going to pick it up just like you told all these different stories about how you found mentors to be a really good mentee. And so what were some of the key things that you've learned from your mentors that you've had throughout your life?
I've really learned a lot about finance. You know, the financial side of the business is something that's like not most important, but very, very important. And so that's been accountants and bankers and things like that. And I've really learned a lot from them. From that side, that's been really a big part of my education. Also, you pick up things here and there on how to be a great employer. I mean, think about it. I'm in a little town. I'm in Ironwood. It's 5,000 people, and you're going to bump into people at the grocery store every time you go there. You're going to bump into a cousin or a relative or a wife or a brother or an employee, and it's the family part of that is very important to us as far as, you know, making them proud to work here and making it great to be able to see them out in them instead of, you know, there's Bob the whip thrasher. And so learning how to really develop a great culture has been really awesome for us to learn. And from that, you know, actually, you know, mentor or consultant, I guess there's a kind of a fine line between which one is which. We've learned a lot. We've brought in consultants too, which are very similar. You basically open yourself up to be criticized. I mean, that's kind of what this is about. You know, what am I doing wrong? I mean, don't sit over there and tell me all the good things about me. I want to hear what it is I want. You know, and I remember the first guy that came in here. You're kind of ouching like, oh, you don't like that, and you don't like that, and he saw that, you know, grimace on my face, and he says, you know, Bob, it's really tough to come in as a mentor or as a consultant and tell you got an ugly baby. Nobody wants to hear they got an ugly baby. And that's kind of so that's another part about being a great mentee is you got to be willing to have somebody point out, you know, a good mentor does it really respectfully, but it's still going to ouch a little. So anyway, you asked what are some of the things I learned, and I remember like I remember specifically, I don't even remember who it was, but it was somebody that I had lunch with, and I think he was at one time the president of I think he was the president of our hospital in town here. Anyway, he walked through, and you know, I'm very entrepreneurial, so I have an upholstery shop and a shop that makes tarps and a shop that makes Stormy Kromer hats and a shop that makes playground canopies and a shop that makes awnings. And he said, you know, my dad was in business, and he said, you can never do justice to more than one product line. And I always remembered that. And I think I'm even, this is maybe 10 years later, that was profound because I didn't forget it. And I wondered, I've always questioned whether that guy's dad was right or I was wrong,
Hmm.
and I was doing it. And so right now, I think I think we're seeing that you can, I think there's a chance for us to improve everything about us as a company if we end up only making Stormy Kromer products. And so that's our new vision, that we will let these other products go and we will only have like one master or whatever. It'll be the Stormy Kromer brand as opposed to these other things. The the reason that Stormy Kromer was able to grow like it has, and a lot of people would know how small it was when I bought it, and when to grow a company it takes money. So we were lucky enough to have other contracts that made a profit that allowed us to put that profit into Stormy Kromer. So it was a great combination. But now I'm back to where, yeah, you're probably right. I really need to focus on Stormy Kromer and leave when I leave for good. Gina and KJ have only Stormy Kromer to focus on. So that was a really big one
Hmm.
for me. Was that Mark, the mentor I have right now? I mean, he's doing all kinds of things. You know, he's pushing me to have get a better annual physical. He's pushing me to get, to stay as healthy as I possibly can.
Hmm.
He's pushing me to, like right now, he thinks I should be on more boards. Like I should start using my expertise to be on board. So we're updating my LinkedIn profile so that instead of it saying I'm the CEO of Stormy Kromer, that some of my accomplishments, so that maybe some company would ask me to be on a board. So there's all kinds of things that just keep coming. I mean, think about it. If you take me high school, 1 year of college, drop in business, the business has one employee and my dad's not even there full time. Imagine all that has to be learned to get to where we are now. Marketing and sales and accounting, and it all comes from the outside somehow, whether it's a consultant, a mentor, or somebody trying to sell you their product, like a marketing agency or something like that. Another trick that I learned was, when you talk about marketing agency, is that everybody, the accountants and legal teams and marketing companies, they have time set aside to give you an hour to learn to sell their services. And like, you can't believe what I learned for 5 1-hour sessions about Stormy Kromer without paying anything. I didn't have the money. It wasn't big enough to do anything. So I went down to Milwaukee and interviewed marketing companies. I got this hat and I got a picture of Stormy Kromer and I got a picture of my grandpa wearing a Stormy Kromer. What do you think I can do with it? And you just start taking notes. And there's so much information out there. And everybody that's willing to talk to you has been helped. You got to remember that part of it too. I mean, that's why I'm helping, passing it down or whatever you want to say. We've all been helped by somebody. And if you're arrogant enough to think that you can leave this earth without passing it down, I think that's just totally wrong. So I just am trying to give back like crazy because of all the people that have helped me. I mean, imagine thinking about it. I didn't pay anybody anything really to learn everything I've learned. I just learned it. And another one that's been really good is getting recommendations on books to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a bookcase that's right alongside of me here, and I have a customer that is a pretty good friend, and he says no human being on earth needs as much self-help as those books. All those books. How can you be that bad that you need that many self-help books?
Gotcha.
So that's another way of doing it. It's books, and whatever you can do now. I suppose it's articles and things like that. But in my day, it was books.
Yeah,
So
so I have a question about sometimes when you are a mentee, it feels like you may have nothing to give. So, or if you're going to become a mentor, right? Are there things that a young person can do to bring value to others as they are still being mentored?
Well, I don't think I think it's a one-way relationship at that, especially at the beginning. And I think the mentor recognizes that I don't think they should be worried about that. What they should bring to the table is their openness, their humbleness, and their willingness to show the mentor that they're worth my hour to talk to.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that's what they need to bring to the table is, I want to spend an hour because I want to help you.
Mm-hmm.
So dang it, get helped by this.
So do you think that was our follow-up question to that was what were things you did to make sure your mentor knew that you valued their time? Was it just doing something with the advice they gave you, or is there more than that?
Yes. And then following up maybe a couple weeks later and said, I used your advice and it worked or something like that. This is how I got that. You told me how to I remember being I remember telling someone, a mentor, that the first thing I needed with Stormy Kromer was a salesman, that I didn't have a salesman that worked for Stormy Kromer. And he said to me, "You're kidding." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Just because you don't have a notepad with an order book that's going to order 12 of these and 14 of these and 16 of these doesn't mean you're not the best salesman for Stormy Kromer right now."
Mm.
And like I didn't think that, but it's the enthusiasm, the passion, the vision. And so like there's this wonderful large company that sells fishing goods and fishing and hunting supplies, and it's big and monstrous. And I just bought Stormy Kromer, and it was a little nothing company, and
Mm.
I wanted to sell to them. And after they told me that I was the best, I went out to whatever state they're in, Colorado, whatever state they're in. And I went out there, and I'm in this big place. I've never done a sales call like that in my life. And I was told by the negative people that it'll take 3 visits to get them to even buy from you. And after they do buy from you, if they like it, they're going to knock you off and make your product without needing you. And I sold it on the first time. I sold the first time. I didn't take 3 tries, and they've been customers ever since. And so then after that happened, I called him up and said, "You were right. That worked really well. Thank you so much. And it's really going to help my business." And then afterwards, because that company was so big, what happened with that, you can all figure it out, but I keep that name out of there for now. But what happened was that kind of made Stormy Kromer unbelievably legitimate.
Mm.
If I got into that big store, then all of a sudden the little mom and pop hunting and fishing stores saw them in that catalog and said, "Geez, they've got that in the catalog. I want it in my store."
Mm-hmm.
I saw that was another lead. So then I remember calling them back a year later and said, not only did I get in, but this is flourishing because of that advice. So I think,
Wow.
because that's the pat on the back you want as a mentor or whatever. That's the thank you. You don't need money or anything like that. You're trying to,
Help people.
help people. Yeah. If you can
Yeah.
find somebody
So
there really are people like that. The problem with the world right now is the good people can't get any better. I mean, a good person in 1920s, this is great as a good person in 1960, as in 2000 and in 2021.
Mm.
The problem is we just keep seeing the bad people seem to be getting worse. And so, but the good people, there's still a lot of amazingly good, wonderful, wonderful people out there.
Mm.
And
I had this other question. you had mentioned like how you had this business difficulty of not being able to have a sales guy, and you were like, and told your mentor that, and he kind of thumped you in the head,
Yeah.
said you do it. But were there other difficulties that you faced in your business that a mentor has helped you make those hard decisions that you didn't really think of yourself?
Yeah. That the most difficult one was realizing, in fact, it's interesting that it's an old friend that's whose advice I got, but he called me just as I was coming on with you, and I texted him and says, I'm on a podcast, I can't talk. But he made me face the fact that a longtime dear employee who had, been through early times with us was not matching the culture of the company now. And that maybe it would be better for both of us if that person didn't come to work here anymore. And that realization was really tough for me to handle and accept and that kind of stuff. And that was really difficult.
Mm.
And it worked out for the better. I followed the advice, and it worked out for the better.
Mm.
And yeah, and actually, we've done that a few times now, and we've really, based on that, we've really focused on like the most amazing culture that we could give anybody here. And when you say good morning, I expect you to say good morning back, not what's good about it, and it's going to be a happy day. And I try to give all my employees that, and that's kind of, that all came from that push, and it's been really good for us.
Mm.
So that sounds like you have to be pretty vulnerable with your mentors, like even for them to know that that's happening in your company. So what do you think the role of vulnerability is in your relationships with your mentors?
Oh, it's really important. I mean, that's, it goes back to that when I was saying before about last week about the you sitting there saying, I know, and, you really don't know. Let them know you're vulnerable. Let them know you don't know. Let them know you're open. And if you're not willing to be vulnerable, it's really hard to get it in, to be comfortable talking to you. I mean, nobody wants to hurt you. I mean, vulnerable can't allow for somebody to get hurt. But if you find the right person that's really matches you, then your vulnerability is kind of held up by care and love. And I mean, it gets to that point if you're open. And that's another thing that I know that I open up to people much quicker than they expect. And I think that's been really great for my relationships with people.
Mm.
I think they just, especially even if somebody's younger, I'll tell them something, something very personal, so that they can feel comfortable that I'm at a comfort level. Or I'll share last year's profit number with somebody. That was done to me when the insurance guy made the biggest impression on me, but he really was my second mentor. The first one actually showed me, it was back in 1973, maybe. Our company fixed tarps for his wood business. So he cut wood and then dried it, and then it went on a semi, and it had to stay dry on the back when it was going down the road. So we made those tarps that go on the back of trucks. And I remember him really picking up on it. I remember him knowing that I was going to, run the business someday, and it was going to be bigger than it is. And I remember him actually showing me last year's profit of his company. And it's like he entrusted me with that, and like, how cool is that? I mean, that was just really awesome. And I think once you realize that person trusts you that at that level, I think that all of a sudden smacks up the relationship. Like, he just entrusted me with this. Now maybe I should be honest with him on the way back. So
Well, Wow, this has been so fun and so good. I just have loved getting to know you. Even like when we did our 15-minute like get to know you meeting, like because I heard you speak at a webinar, and then you were like, oh yeah, if you want to get to know someone, you just like send them an email or send them a letter or something and say, hey, you know more about this than I do, and I'd love to buy you lunch. And I was like, I'm just gonna go to their website and fill out their contact form and see. And I went there and I looked all over for your email and I couldn't find it. And I was like,
Probably
like
a good thing it's not
whatever.
there.
What'd you say, Becca?
It's probably a good thing that's not on there, but
Yeah, that's true. Write that down. Don't do that. But if you're a CEO, you probably shouldn't have that on your website. But then I was like, well, a couple months later, I just filled out the contact form and I was like, okay, like this, we'll just see what happens. And then like 2 days later, I get this email from you, and it was just this thread of all these people who had forwarded it to someone else, who had forwarded it to someone else, and then finally ended up at you. And I was just like, oh my word, Becca, like the CEO of Stormy Kromer is gonna like be on our podcast. And I was just, I don't know, I was so
Thank you.
excited. So
That's
it's
really
been
nice.
really fun to just like get to talk with you and hear your wisdom. And so thank you so much for being with us. We're going to transition to the Sister Gawk portion of our episode, and I thought this was fitting because
Your turn to be funny.
well, I think we've maybe told you this before, but there's 7 kids in our family, and the sister that's between Rachel or Becca and I is Rachel. And we just kind of poke fun at her all the time, and like we're always like just teasing her. And this one time, you would mention fishing, that's what made me think of it. But this one time I found this pamphlet. It was like a little booklet about fish oil and like all the advantages of fish oil. And so I had it, and I literally chased her around the house for like a good 20 minutes reading this booklet to her. And she was like, get out of here, leave me alone. And she finally forced me outside, locked me outside, and I'm like screaming at the top of my lungs, like reading off this booklet. And then she threw it away, and I was like, I didn't say anything about it, and I've pulled it out of the garbage, and I've kept it for years. And then just about, I think it was like 3 or 4 months ago or something, I sent it to her in the mail. And then it's just like, hey, and she lived in this apartment at the time where like it didn't go, she never checked her mailbox. She's forwarded all the mail to my parents' house. So then I was like, hey, check your mail, check your mail. And she was like, why? And then it finally came, and she's like, are you joking? So anyways, that's just the tie-in of like the fishing stuff that you were talking about, and sisters and
Oh, that's cute. That's a great story.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. It was so fun to get to chat with you, and and just hear your wisdom. If you guys as listeners like this episode, then follow us on Instagram, Business Talk Sister Gawk, and we'd love to connect with you if you have any questions at all. And thanks so much for being here with us this week.